everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Thursday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I'm Eric, checking in with AJ in Austin, Texas, and this is episode 205 for Thursday, the 8th of February, 2018. How's it going, AJ?
It's going well, man. Looking forward to this episode. I think it's going to be a useful episode, and I think we're going to touch on some topics that are common questions for people. A lot of stuff around mileage prices and good deals, which is kind of what everyone's hunting for. So hopefully this will be useful content for the listeners.
Yeah, so for core content today, we are going to talk about discounted award pricing, specifically opportunities where you pay fewer miles or points. So this is focused on the points that you need to spend rather than the taxes and fees aspect of the redemption. But there are a few programs that have super consistent, really valuable discounted awards based on destination. And we'll also talk a little bit about a different type of discount, which is sort of off-peak pricing, which is generally not about where you're traveling, but more about what dates you want to travel when you're traveling. So we're going to talk about those two categories, I guess, of award discounts and get into how you can find out if one of those is going to apply and try and use the right type of points to end up getting a pretty significant discount in some cases for your trip. We've also got a few news and updates items. Top stories this week. American has updated their pricing engine for award tickets so that it kind of disadvantages direct flights. And so we came across this with the booking service a little bit. We're going to talk in a little bit more detail about that. We've also got an update from LifeMiles that they're adjusting the mileage expiration policy. So that's Avianca's program based in Colombia. And they're going to be expiring points with a lot less time, cutting their expiration time in half. And also changing what resets the expiration. So we'll cover that. And then we're going to roll the last two news items right into the core content, which is Flying Blue promo awards that have been announced and American Airlines reduced mileage awards for bookings in February and travel, through May for both of those. So into detail.
Lumped into the core content, we're going to touch on some other options as well, whether it be Delta or British Airways and a couple other different promotions or ways that you can potentially get better than normal deals with those given currencies.
Yep. And last but not least, I have a update for you guys about my credit card insurance claim. We talked about that, I think, back a few episodes ago. I think it was the first episode of 2018 that I had talked about having some bags damaged and filing a claim. Have slowly but surely made progress with that. It's been a little bit more of a challenge than I initially anticipated. And so I'll give you guys some updates and lesson learned. Not 100% resolved, but I thought it'd be worth touching on that as well for folks considering which card to use and what the process looks like if something goes wrong.
Yeah. All right, man, let's get into it. Let's talk about AA blocking saver level awards when you're not connecting on a longer flight. It's some ambiguous pricing, some confusing pricing, some frustrating pricing.
Yeah, so one of the things about the award programs is the rule is we make the rules and we can change them whenever we want. And that's how most frequent flyer programs are written. So American Airlines offers a couple of different award levels for their own flights. And so for this news update, we're talking about flights booked with American miles that are operated by American Airlines. And so for those flights, they have their own award chart that's separate from their One World and Partner Airlines award chart. And typically the prices are the saver level, which applies to economy, business, and first class. And then they've also got anytime awards, which are the standard award level, which can be a lot more expensive than those saver awards. And so what has happened with American is that they've decided that they're now going to offer saver level awards from point A to point B, but only if you're flying onwards from point B to somewhere else. So in other words, if you do the award search, a really good example is like a transcontinental flight. So let's say you want to go from New York to San Francisco. You could search on AmericanAirlines.com and see that the JFK to San Francisco direct flight is not available at the saver level. They're charging 50,000 miles, let's say, for an anytime award, which is way, way too many points to pay for that type of ticket. However, if you search for JFK to Los Angeles, you'll see that it's possible to book a Saver Award at 12,500 miles, and the flight connects in San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about the same exact flight, and you're going to get a way better deal by tacking on an extra segment.
Exactly.
We're going to get a way worse deal by not tacking on the segment.
So this goes back to the concept of hidden city ticketing, which I can't remember the name of the website.
Skiplagged. I actually was just reading up on it. It was
they got in some hot water with United, right?
Not only United, I believe American Airlines and Orbitz. So they had some heavy hitters in the travel space coming down on this guy.
So just for a little bit of context, the Skiplag folks realized that airlines often charge, and this was built around paid tickets, so not for award travel, but essentially that airlines often charge ridiculously high prices for certain direct flights, and you can actually get a discount by buying a ticket that connects in the city that you actually want to go to and carrying on to another city. I actually came across an example of this just yesterday. We had a client that's looking to go to Barcelona, and there was a positioning flight that was going to be necessary. And when I looked at direct flights from where they were starting to the city that I wanted to position them to for the award, the paid ticket was like $600. And then I looked at a flight that went somewhere else and saw that they could connect there, and it was only about $200.
Yeah.
So the hidden city ticketing, I guess you can say, is alive and well, and the price discrimination that the airlines are doing is still there. But what we've discovered here with award tickets seems to be a pretty new thing that Americans doing by charging higher prices, putting a premium on those direct flights. So let's talk about what to do. There's two options. The first one is using the hidden city ticketing trick.
Yeah.
And
now you need to be careful if you're doing this for a couple of reasons.
So this one's a little bit dangerous from a practical standpoint. If you book a flight, if you want to go from New York to San Francisco and you book that flight to Los Angeles, the first thing is you got to be careful about checked bags, because the airline's going to check your bags to Los Angeles, your final destination. So you either need to be traveling with just a carry-on bag. I think that's probably the only option. It's maybe possible that you can ask them to check your bag just to San Francisco, saying that you need something out of your bag before the layover. But that's a little bit risky. The second thing you need to be aware of is it has to be the last segment of the itinerary that you're throwing away. So if you do this for a round trip, New York to San Francisco and back from San Francisco to New York, if you throw away that LA segment, they're going to cancel the rest of the ticket. And
so you really want to do this as two one-ways, where, like you said, the last segment of the itinerary, call it two itineraries for a round trip to get from New York to California and then back to New York.
Yep. Now, doing this is not illegal, but it does break the conditions of carriage, the agreement that you essentially sign by buying the ticket. When you purchase, you're agreeing to their terms, and their conditions of carriage say you're not supposed to do this.
American Airlines claims it's unethical.
Yes.
What does that even mean?
It's unethical to thwart us in overcharging you for a flight that you don't want. Now, the other thing about the hidden city ticketing and doing this with awards is American will probably catch on if you do this a lot. And so I think if you're just flying with a carry-on bag.
And it is against the terms and conditions that you agree to when you engage with at least American Airlines, for example, whether you're buying a flight or using your miles, that you're, I believe, agreeing to not do this.
Right. So the consequences here are that if you do this a lot, they may catch on and take action against you, maybe ban you from flying with them. I don't know. I haven't really heard much about what the consequences would be. I personally, would, I guess, consider trying it for a flight that I booked for myself, but I would never recommend, this for somebody that's less experienced with travel and is already stressed out.
It seems to me it would be very unlikely that anything negative would come from this if you do it one time, unless you're like a social media influencer and you're bragging about it. Like, people miss flights all the time. And if they, for some reason, wanted to check in and see what was going on,
plausible deniability there. Something happened. I had to stay in San Francisco. It wasn't my
I had a work call. Couldn't get back on the flight because you guys' Wi-Fi sucks. If you would have,
So that brings us to option number 2. There's a little bit lower risk workaround here, and that would be to use an American Airlines hold to secure the flight JFK to San Francisco to LA. You book that online for $12,500 in economy, and instead of paying for the ticket, you put it on a 5-day hold. And after you've put it on a 5-day hold, you should be able to call American to ticket the reservation and just ask them to drop that last segment. And ideally, because it's already been created as a reservation with a record locator, it's not going to reprice the award on you just because you're having the agent eliminate the last flight. We don't have really any case examples of this in action, so I don't know if it works.
I'm curious if this would work for pay flights as well.
Maybe. I feel like it's more likely that they would reprice the itinerary with a paid ticket where they'd say, oh, okay, there's a difference in cost. But anyway, so the option number 2 of trying to use a hold and then calling to confirm, not something we've tried ourselves. This is a pretty new development. So we'd be interested to find out if anybody has success with that. And in particular, it's more likely that they will probably charge you that phone booking fee, which is, I think, $25 for domestic travel. Mm-hmm. Certainly could be worth it if you're saving a bunch of miles by using the strategy. So if anybody has experience with that, we'd love to hear back from you. And if we find out any more information, we can provide some updates on a future show.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep things moving. Let's get to LifeMiles. So they've got some expiration policy changes that are, it's not like a huge deal, but it's a significant change. So for some context, previously, Avianca LifeMiles, they used to have a 24-month expiration on their miles if there was really just inactivity with the account. And you used to be able to, I believe, get your account active and buy yourself another 2 years by earning miles, I think redeeming miles, pretty much doing anything with their program would get
anything that changed your balance should have reset your mileage activity. And so under this new policy, which kicks in on April 15th of 2018, they will expire miles after 12 months, and only earning miles extends the expiration date, which means that if you redeem some miles, that's not going to help. You need to earn miles.
What does it technically mean to earn miles? Could you buy a small sum of miles spending on one of their co-branded credit cards? Would that be just any miles?
Yeah. So the hard thing is there's only one co-branded credit card really with Avianca. They are a transfer partner of Citi. So one way to do this would be to transfer the minimum of 1,000 points over to LifeMiles. That's probably the easiest way. But the fact that redeeming miles doesn't help eliminates a really low-hanging fruit, kind of easy way of just donating a few miles to some sort of charity, which is usually possible with most programs. So overall, this is definitely a devaluation, not a huge, probably problem for most people, but, makes it to even more important that you only save miles or accumulate miles in the LifeMiles program if, one, you have a system, a credit card or something where you're earning miles on a consistent basis, or two, if you've got specific travel. It's never really a good idea to proactively transfer miles from Citi.
What about anytime if you happen to be flying Star Alliance, just credit those miles to Avianca, and then, I could see instances where that's not a big deal. Like even if it was you'd be able to credit miles if you're flying on like a short haul domestic United flight, right?
Yeah, you can credit miles that way. I mean, I think the thing that usually drives my decision about where to credit miles is that depending on the fare code that is used to book the ticket can have a big impact on how many miles you get. Yeah. So let's say you get a basic economy flight on United that's like their super low, crappy
you're not gonna be
fare class.
You're not going to be earning anything.
You might earn miles with one of their partners. So the thing is, they're all different, right? So if you're looking at with that fare class, the basic economy, you're going to earn 25% of the miles you flew if you credit to Avianca, but you could earn 75% of the miles you flew if you credit to Singapore. It's probably better, unless it was a super short flight, to credit that to Singapore because you're getting more miles.
Unless you've got miles with Avianca, because, the absolute amount of miles, if you don't have any miles with Singapore, earning 75% is not going to get you anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's an insignificant amount of miles. If you're flying... there's really no ways to fly domestic economy and have one flight be a meaningful amount of miles you earn.
That's true, but it doesn't have to be domestic, I guess, is the other thing.
Well,
So,
that was my example. If you've got like a United
short
flight from Chicago to New York, it's like, what you really gonna do with those miles if you max them out? Really?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Like,
well, I guess the one takeaway is this, I guess, sort of makes city miles more useful in that sense, where if you do maintain an Avianca balance, all it's going to cost is 1,000 city miles to
right.
transfer
And that's the
over.
thing too, as far as this goes, this only matters if you have, what you would consider a meaningful amount of Avianca miles. This is just some risk management around the portfolio of having some options to make sure that things don't expire, because 12 months goes by pretty quick when you're talking.
That's the low end of mileage expiration. Well, that's a good transition. So for folks that have a meaningful amount of Avianca Life miles, they've currently got a 100% bonus when you transfer miles in the next couple of days. So the timeline for this is February 5th, which is a few days ago as of the release date, through the 12th. So a couple days to go. And the maximum number of miles that you can transfer is 75,000. So the way this works, if you already have an Avianca account, let's say you and your spouse have Avianca Life Miles accounts, and you've got 50 or 75,000 miles in your account, and she's got a few thousand miles in hers. You can generate additional miles by doing this transfer. And so the advantage is that you're consolidating those accounts. So let's say you take your 75,000, transfer them over to your spouse's account. Then you're going to get that 100% bonus. So 75,000 miles, let's say your spouse didn't have any miles, she would get 150 by doing this transfer. So there's a way to generate up to 75,000 additional miles. It's essentially like buying miles, but with a slightly different process. Now, the catch here is that to be able to take advantage, you need to have miles in an existing account. And because the deadline for the bonus is February 12th, it's not going to give you enough time to transfer miles from Citi to an Avianca account and then from one Avianca account to another to generate this bonus. So ignore this entirely. I would not risk moving a bunch of Citi miles. When I ran a test, it took about 7 days, and the show's going to be out on the 8th. So that means there'll be just 4 days.
4 days, yeah.
But if you have a big Life Miles balance and it's not quite enough for a trip that you want, you may consider this. When you break out the math, it comes out to 1.5 cents per point. So it's spending about $1,000, a little bit more, I think, to generate 75,000 additional miles.
Yeah, I think that's the way I would kind of look at it, is you've got a chance to buy miles for 1.5 cents per point, right?
Yeah, I think with the complication of you need those miles already in your account.
And there's a little bit of an opportunity cost where now you no longer have these points that could become many types of points. I guess it all depends, like how many Citi points you have. Right?
Well, but with Citi, there's not time to do this, so you really need to already have Life Miles. And I thought it was worth mentioning because the folks that we've connected with through Award Wallet, we've got a pretty substantial stash of Life Miles that people are saving up for trips. So
I mean, Life Miles are definitely valuable in buying. An opportunity to buy Life Miles at 1.5 cents is not bad. You know?
They do offer just straight up sales pretty frequently. So if this one is not something you can take advantage of, fret not. There will almost certainly be a straight up buy miles promotion.
That'll probably be a similar deal.
Sometimes to 1.5 cents per point. I think we've seen them as low as like 1.3, but
I think
you have to
132.
buy a lot of miles to get it that way. All right, so we're almost to the core content here. Before we get into that, though, wanted to give this update on my baggage insurance marathon. So in episode 200, which was 4th of January, we talked about the free insurance benefits that are included for travel that you book with rewards cards. And so basically, if you pay the taxes and fees on a mileage ticket, or if you just pay the airfare on a revenue ticket, you've got a bunch of different benefits, and it depends on which card you use to pay that determines who you're going to be filing a claim with and what the coverage entails.
Right.
So in this example, I paid the taxes and fees on my flight back from Detroit to Austin after Christmas, paid it with my Chase Sapphire Reserve card. And when I arrived in Austin, one of my bags, the roller bag, had the frame just basically crushed. It was like they put it in a car compactor. And so the wheels stopped working, like everything was just a mess.
Rendered useless.
And one of my backpacks that I had like wrapped I had some glass containers in there. Probably not the smartest thing to check those, but they had liquid. So what choice do you have? Wrapped them in like 5 towels, and I thought it was pretty well protected, but it was not. The bottles broke, bunch of wine all over the place. So anyways, I had to file and go through this claims process. Now the first step is that you need to file a claim with the airline. And then after that claim is completed and a decision is rendered by the airline, then you can proceed with your claim with Chase or with the bank that issued the card you used to pay. So a couple of lessons I learned from filing my claim with American. Number one, always go to the baggage desk at the airport immediately to file the claim, because they're going to want to see the evidence of the damage. And so if you go home, it just means you're going to make a trip back to the airport to file that, which is what I did. Wasn't the worst experience, but would have been much nicer to just get it done when I got the bags off the carousel. I also, you have to, basically... I guess the big thing for me is like you got to stay on top of the back and forth, because these things can easily just get shuffled aside with all the stuff you have with daily life. And so I use like one of my not everyday email addresses that I don't check all the time.
Yeah.
And so they're likely to follow up with additional forms to fill out.
So in this instance, what's like the key indicator here? The claim number. So then you just call and say, hey, so you want to just make sure you have the claim number, whatever that is, so you can call up and say, hey, I'm calling about, what's the claim number? Calling about this.
Yeah, and calling really sucks with the American claims process. So fortunately, once you get the initial report filed with the baggage desk, they give you a claim number. From there, you can reference that in email. And the email support was pretty decent once I got track of their messages.
I was thinking about that the other day when we've been working on building out some tools that'll be a little bit better and more useful for you folks. But I was actually thinking about that, like emailing airlines, like with big organizations like that, I almost feel like I'm just sending my email into a black hole just to get like an autoresponder thing and then maybe just never hear from them.
Yeah.
But that's encouraging.
So docs required by AA, I needed to have my bag tags or the baggage claim check, the original report that I made at the airport. The thing that I missed by email was that after that original report had been sent, they emailed me some additional forms to fill out, which were like the claim saying this is what the bags were, this is how much they cost, all that stuff. But the items that you have to put on that form, you're going to need to know your ticket number. You're going to need to know some stuff that's on your boarding pass, basically. So hang on to boarding passes until you know you've got all your gear and you're not going to have to file any claims. And then I also needed to provide the receipt for purchasing the ticket, which usually comes by email, but just another document that you could lose and end up not being able to file.
Man, sorry to cut you off, but I'm just these things, this information. I'm thinking about how cool in the future it'd be if we could build out our technology where when people book stuff that saves, and if you want to file a claim, like just pops up with like an email template with like everything autofilled other than the stuff you need to gather.
Yeah, they definitely are losing people out of the claims process just because of the minutia that you have to keep track of. The other thing that American asked me for was the original receipt for the bags. For anything that was over $150, which, is kind of preposterous. Like, I don't have the receipt for almost anything that I've purchased.
It's ridiculous.
So it was years ago that I had bought these bags, right? So I was able to get a partial victory. They would cover anything under $150 that I didn't have the original receipt for. So the backpack that they messed up was $80. I actually got a check a couple of days ago for $80 from American. So already, nice win. We'll be able to replace one of the bags. But they said, sorry, the other $300 roller bag, we can't cover that because you don't have the original receipt. So onwards to Chase. Chase has been pretty good so far. The claim is still in the process of settling because I just got the initial settlement back from American a few days ago. So once I was able to provide Chase with the email from American saying, yep, we'll cover $80, but no, we will not cover the other one, that was enough to be essentially the settlement from the common carrier. That's one of the requirements. So Chase required basically the same information as American, so there wasn't a bunch of extra work to do there. They wanted the original claim with the airline, the boarding pass, your itinerary. The only extra piece of information that they wanted was the credit card statement that shows that you actually paid for the taxes and fees on this ticket with the card that has the coverage.
Okay.
So that part was all pretty straightforward. I think the only major lesson that I've learned so far with the second part of the claim is that when I got into the part where Chase wanted to see the itinerary, and the original itinerary that I booked with American was for a different date and had a different connecting airport. So I started out with January 4th from Detroit to Dallas to Austin, and then I was able to move that up to December 30th, which I was really happy about. But that made it really hard because I had to find a copy of the original and of the changed itinerary for Chase. So the lesson learned here is if you make any changes to a flight, make sure you keep a copy of the original itinerary and of the updated one, just in case you need them for these claims. So that's it so far. Still got $300 outstanding. The Chase claim baggage coverage is up to $3,000 per traveler and per incident, so should be covered for the full amount. They informed me that they also reduce the value of the claim if you don't have the receipt. So I guess maybe one takeaway for those looking into buying bags is save your damn receipt if you want full coverage.
Yeah, man, I can't bring myself to the we're going to save receipts now. I hate that. I mean, that's just so stupid. It's like, I mean, whoever makes up that rule, like, do you save all your receipts? Do you really?
Doubt it. Show me your bag receipt. But Chase is only reducing the value of the claim by 25%, which I feel like is kind of a jerk move, but also it just incentivizes people to lie. Like if you know that and they're like, oh, you don't have the receipt.
Is, okay, I'll inflate things. If I want to truly be a straight shooter here from my own, kind of selfish lens is, all right, I'll inflate things by 25% and then we'll be square.
Yeah, I don't know how, if they don't have the receipt, they don't know. So at any rate, I filed the real amount of the bag value and hopefully we'll get 75% of that and we'll report back when I do. All right, let's get into today's core content. We're going to talk about discounted travel. The first two programs we're going to cover also tie in with news and updates because they both released new opportunities for bookings made in the month of February and beyond. I like American Airlines and Flying Blue both because the points are relatively easy to acquire. American's got a bunch of co-branded cards with Citi and Barclays, and they're transfer partners with SPG. Flying Blue is friends with everybody, all four transferable currencies. Now, we're going to start with those two. For the sake of completeness, we've also got some basics about Miles & More, which is Lufthansa and Swiss, their frequent flyer program. They've got a discounted award called Miles & More Bargains. Delta has some unpredictable award sales, and we were going to talk a little bit about British Airways at the end as well. But let's start with the American Airlines Reduced Mileage Awards.
Yeah, man. So these are generally for specific city pairs, or not necessarily a city pair, but there's a list of cities, and if your airport is on there that you are going to be departing from or traveling to, you get the deal as long as you can meet the other criteria, like having saver availability.
Now, the most important criteria for the reduced mileage awards is that you have one of the co-branded cards.
Right. And there's two tiers of this.
Yes.
There's the.
Now, I would say, though, for the most part, almost everybody is going to be in one of the first tiers. So there's the high-level cards that have, most of them have a somewhat more significant annual fee. And for those, so this is like the Executive Platinum, the $450 fee card, Platinum Select, which is a great $95 annual fee card, and the Family of Aviator, Aviator Red, Silver, and the Business card. So those have a 7,500 mile round trip discount. And this is only for flights within North America. So this includes flights to and from Canada, within the U.S. I think there's also a few Mexico destinations that are there as well.
Yeah, there may be. I'm not positive, but when you look at the list, you'll see most of the destinations are within the U.S.
Yep. And so the second tier is like the Citi Gold card, which I believe is a no annual fee, and the Aviator Blue. I
spoke with somebody the other day.
Slightly reduced.
They had the City Gold card. They've had it since 1995.
Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah. That was actually one of the first cards that I got a hold of. And at the time, it was in 2008. It was one of my first rewards cards, and it was a 75,000 mile sign-up bonus. So that one's just been collecting dust. I think I eventually converted it into a bronze card because that has no annual fee. But anyways, if you have the City Gold, you get a slightly lower discount of 500 miles off a round trip or 2,500 off of a one-way. And also, these mileage awards can be combined with the 10% rebate that you get with a couple of these cards. So most notably, the Aviator Red and the Advantage Platinum Select give you 10% of your miles back after redeeming. So if you redeem a 25,000 point round trip domestically, you're going to get 2,500 miles back.
Let's clarify something with this, because I used to be under the impression that you had to pay your taxes and fees with those cards to get the rebate, but
that's the case.
So if you wanted
to have them.
Yeah, so you have the card, you get the rebate, and if you got a stack of cards like a lot of our listeners, you're going to pick what benefits do I want to protect myself with. Okay. Yeah.
So I guess to run through the process here, these awards are, so these discounts are available only with Saver Awards. So you got to be able to find Saver availability for your destination. As you mentioned, the list, which we've got a link in the show notes to the list of all the cities, but it doesn't matter if the airport that you're leaving from or the airport you're going to is on the list if one of the two is on the list. So in my case, when I booked that trip that started this whole damn baggage situation, I booked a reduced mileage award. Detroit was not on the list, but Austin was. So that's what made me eligible. And fortunately, I paid with the Sapphire Reserve. So I still was able to book the reduced mileage award because I have the card. And I got the 10% mileage discount.
So as far as the process goes, like I said, there's got to be Saver Award. Another thing is this isn't something that you're just going to find in the flight search engine. There's some extra processes here. So, I mean, the after you find, let's say you find your city on the list and you're going to or from, so you know that you're going to get the deal there. What's recommended, we would say, is to put that on hold, to go ahead and put that flight on hold, because then you're going to actually make the call.
Yep. And so the real thing is just like if you found the awards there, you don't want to wait for 10 minutes on hold and then try and book it and have the agent say, you know what, it's not there anymore. I can't find it. So if you see it on the website, you can put it on hold and then it's guaranteed for you. Then you can call and you've got kind of your leisure to ticket the reservation. You'll have 5 days. When you call American to ticket, you're going to have to provide them with the reduced mileage award redemption code. And so that's on the page that lists all of the cities. It'll tell you the specific code. It's like a 5-character code with letters and numbers, kind of obscure and weird, but the agents need that to apply the discount. And so basically you just look up which card you have and there's a code for each card for the type of travel. And the last piece of advice here is to always ask the agents to waive the phone booking fee. When I booked that ticket from Detroit to Austin, she tried to tell me there was going to be a $25 phone fee. And I just reminded her very nicely that the reduced mileage award, that promo code can't be applied online. And could you see if you can get a waiver for this? They'll usually check with their rates desk, who will reinforce the rule of waiving those fees for for awards that can't be booked online. So I guess to give you just kind of a quick idea of the costs here, American's award chart saver level is going to be $12,500 for flights that are longer than 500 miles. And so the reduced mileage award here is going to save you $3,750 on a one-way. So that brings your total cost down to $8,700. That's already a really good deal.
Right. And
with the 10%, you do even better.
Brings us down to under 8,000 points. One thing that just dawned on me that I think may be an opportunity that is not talked about with these awards is some of the airports, if you look at the list, are obscure airports, and obscure airports are generally expensive as hell to fly from. Like I'm looking at the list and I came across Kalamazoo, Michigan.
No way.
Yep, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
I didn't even know there was an airport.
There is an airport. It is tiny, but I mean, it is expensive. Because I remember when I was working a corporate job, and like looking at buying flights to Virginia, to Richmond, and it's like, wow, $950 for a domestic flight from Kalamazoo. Okay,
boy, that's a flash from the past, man. That's that was pretty much where we started our entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. Another one like a Joplin, Missouri. I was just going through the list. I'm like, man, these are like airports that, and that's the thing too. Like we've talked with a lot of customers recently, and there's definitely some pain around people being from smaller markets that don't have access to a huge airport. So
yeah, I think the bigger challenge there is that many times they'll only have a couple of routes, and so you'll need to be able to connect through the major hub. Like, a small airport like Kalamazoo, I would imagine American only flies to Chicago, maybe Charlotte from Kalamazoo, where there's typically fewer options. But the good thing about this is that you can connect in any airport as long as either your origin or your destination is on the ticket. You should be fine. One final thing here, which is an interesting combo with what we were talking about earlier, is technically, if you wanted to take advantage of a reduced mileage award, you could, let's say you're going from Detroit to Los Angeles, neither city is on the list. You could technically book something from Detroit to Los Angeles to San Francisco, which is on the list.
Right.
Get that reduced mileage award and throw away the last segment.
Right.
Not for beginners, but lots of interesting stuff with this. And the bottom line for me is that, these reduced mileage awards put American one-way flights in the very lowest category of, what it would cost.
It really doesn't get
the shortest flights with BA miles are going to be 7,500, but any connection is going to increase the cost for those. Southwest, sometimes they'll have awards in the 8,000 mile or 9,000 mile range for one ways, but that puts AA miles at one of the lowest levels. And American's been better overall recently with opening up saver availability. So I think this deal, if anything, has gotten more valuable. And there's a lot of airports. We're talking like 100.
It's a big list. So any listeners in Michigan, we're getting very well represented. So it's a month by month, but so what they just released is February, March, April, and May. They tell you. So for Michigan, we've got Detroit is on the list, Lansing is on the list, Grand Rapids is on the list, Kalamazoo is on the list, and so is Flint.
Wow.
So folks in Michigan will have an opportunity to really go anywhere at these rates.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of states and places with many options.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Definitely take advantage of that. And really, the only rule is that your travel needs to be in the month that the city is on the list. So the way the chart's set up is it's just like February. There's either a checkbox or there's not. So you can kind of see what days you may be able to travel and take advantage. All right, let's move on to the next item here. So this is the Flying Blue Promo Awards. Now, we've talked about Flying Blue Promo Awards for probably a year now on the show.
Yeah.
It's a monthly list of reduced cost awards. The big thing about this is that they're all for travel that touches Europe. So it's basically from the KLM hub in Amsterdam and the Air France hub in Charles de Gaulle. And the flight discounts are for trips to different regions of the world. They're either discounted by 25% and occasionally 50%, although the 50% is an endangered species at this point. We've seen a lot more 25%. Yeah. Used to be a couple of 50%ers in every new Flying Blue Promo Award release. I believe this time, at least for North America, is all 25%. There may be a few international destinations, but this is for travel booked in February, and the flights can be in the month of April or May. And so we've got 4 U.S. destinations that all have discounts on economy, 2 Canadian destinations that have discounts on business class. So the breakdown here, we've got 3 destinations in the U.S. That are at economy discount of 25%. That's going to be Houston, Minneapolis, and Seattle. And then we've got Edmonton and Toronto for business class flights. That's also a 25% discount. So that makes it 18,750 miles to Europe.
One-way and economy ones. Great deal.
Really good deal. Flying Blue's already one of the better deals at 25,000 each way, compared with most programs at 30. So this is just an exceptionally good deal. Sometimes you got some taxes and fees that are a little bit higher than some other programs.
You can, it's reasonable. It's totally reasonable to get from the U.S. to Europe one way with Air France, like $80.
Yep.
So that's definitely good stuff. Another thing about this is it is, like you mentioned, I think you mentioned it, it's limited availability. They've got their inventory, and when it runs out, it runs out. So generally it's best to catch this early in the month and then scope out, see if there's anything that piques your interest or aligns with your travel plans.
Yeah, one other thing that is just worth mentioning, a couple of international highlights that I thought were kind of cool. Ho Chi Minh City, once again, is on the list for premium economy. So that's Saigon, Vietnam. That's 40,000 miles for a one-way in premium economy. And that's a pretty long flight from Charles de Gaulle. So that's a nice flight to have a little bit extra leg room. There's also Panama City and Bogota, which caught my attention because Panama City is listed with the Caribbean rather than with Central America and South America. So the takeaway here, both of them are 25% discounts on economy, but Panama City is quite a bit cheaper. So it's $22,500 to get to Panama City. I think Bogota is $26,000.
Those are like very comparable flight distances when you consider how far the actual flights would be from, say, Paris.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if you did want to connect to somewhere else in Latin America, Panama City is a great hub. So it's always good to see hub airports because Panama City is a Star Alliance hub. And so if you were in Europe and wanted to go somewhere else in Latin America, you could get a very cheap flight over the ocean to Panama City and then connect on another award.
One thing we didn't mention, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but does Air France Flying Blue not define Israel in Europe? And so if you catch one of your flights, let's say is a KLM flight going into Amsterdam, I think it's Amsterdam only, you could hypothetically go to Tel Aviv for these prices.
Yes. Yeah. That's definitely true. So that's one of the overlap sections where most other programs treat Israel as part of the Middle East. And so the prices are generally a little bit higher than flights to Europe. So that's a nice, I guess what we'd call an award chart sweet spot.
Yeah.
So anyways, the other piece that I thought was cool about this is if you set it up right, Flying Blue can be a great way to get a good chunk of a round the world ticket because, if you use Europe as a stopping point, you can fly from, let's say, position to Houston. We're in Austin. It's a 2-hour drive or a $100 flight to Houston. You position to that, you fly to Paris, spend some time in Europe. It's a super cheap flight in miles. Then once you're done with Europe, then you go back to Paris or Amsterdam and book that flight to Ho Chi Minh City.
Yeah.
Then, you've had 2 major stops and your total mileage cost is going to be, less than a round trip economy ticket for one segment in economy, one segment in premium economy. So anyway, some cool things you can piece together using Europe and specifically Paris or Amsterdam as your sort of hub within Europe. And you can take as much time in between those as long as you're able to book both flights in the April and May time range. So it gives you a nice amount of time for a stopover. All right, so that concludes the 2 major programs. These ones I think are unique because of consistency. They always have some sort of set of awards that are announced every month. There's usually a booking window, and the travel windows typically 1 or 2 months after, and you've got a window of 1 or 2 months to fly. Now, the other ones that we were going to talk about here, Delta has occasional award sales. But the big problem with Delta is, number one, you don't really know how good the deal is because their award chart isn't published. And so the prices are just what they say they are on any given day. But they do occasionally launch reduced cost compared to what they normally charge.
And sometimes they're great deals.
Yeah.
The way that I kind of do the math in my head with Delta, and especially with the promotion, is grade the promotion against American and United's prices. And if it beats those, it's a great use of SkyMiles. So if you just do some simple binary logic, is Delta better or worse than American and United normally in prices? It's worse. So that means if a promotion is better than the better miles, offload your Delta SkyMiles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the best way to stay on top of those is to just keep an eye on the blogs. We'll announce them on the podcast, but a lot of times they're flash sales.
Sometimes 24, 48 hours.
Yep. And so that's something we report whenever we get those for the Abroaders community as well. A little bit better feed of information if you're really looking to stay on top of things. That could be a really good value to be able to catch those before they disappear. I guess that's kind of it for Delta. It's going to be hard-coded into the website is one of the good things so that, when those deals come up, you can just book them.
Right.
And again, those are often very limited availability. Once they sell enough of them, they raise the prices back up to the normal level. The next one is the Miles and More mileage bargains. Now, this isn't quite as interesting to me just because fewer people have Lufthansa Miles and More. The program is only a transfer partner with SPG, so it's a little bit harder to get miles. You got to use some of the more valuable types of miles. But Miles & More are kind of famous for having much better award availability on business and first class flights on Lufthansa and on Swiss, awards that are just not available for Star Alliance partners. And so the bargains typically are at least a 50% discount, which I was surprised by. A lot of times you'll see flights that are 60,000 miles round trip down at 25 or even 20,000 for the award. Now, the restrictions are a little bit intense here. So there's no cancellation or rebooking. I assume that means you forfeit your miles if you're not able to take the trip. It's not available on code share, so it's going to be only the Miles & More family of airlines.
So it'll be Lufthansa and Swiss.
Yeah, there's a couple of other ones. I think Austrian is tied in with that, and I think LOT, Polish Airlines, is also tied in with them. I'm not 100% sure, but there's the link that we've got in the show notes has both the current deals, and that link is kind of a permanent one, so you can check back and see what the active deals are. And then there's also some terms and conditions that are definitely worth a read. It's going to reiterate to you that you're not going to be able to cancel them. But they've got a special section for Austrian Airlines, Brussels Airlines, and LOT Polish, and then Lufthansa and Swiss. So I think those are the carriers that you're looking at. And Eurowings, which is sort of a subdivision of Lufthansa. It's their
American Eagle for American Airlines.
American Eagle version of that. So definitely can be a great value, but you got to have solid travel plans. And it may not be the best use of Miles & More. I'd save those for business class. And
I think this could apply to like a surprisingly large number of our podcast listeners. I think we've got like a small but modest base of folks that have done a lot of business travel in Europe, and they've accumulated a lot of life miles because of that.
Yep. So the last one to talk about here is British Airways. And this, I guess, we were talking before the show about kind of how to handle this. Thus far, all the ones that we've talked about are based on the destination, or in the American Airlines case, the origin or the destination. But it's a specific set of cities that you're eligible to book these discounted awards. With British Airways, we kind of depart from that and are looking at discounts that are based on the time of year that you travel. And the reason I wanted to talk about the British Airways one is that unlike a lot of the other programs that have an off-peak award chart, they have one for pretty much every destination, and it's a significant number of dates throughout the year. So if you look at the calendar, it's probably 200 dates out of 365 that have this off-peak pricing for each year. And there's a slightly different off-peak calendar for Iberia versus British Airways, but both of them have it. And so these are lower price tickets. Typically, I think, like an example that I did recently would be London to Austin has a direct flight, which is always advantageous with the distance-based pricing scheme for British Airways. And I think that ticket, when it was off peak, was about 16,000 miles for a one-way from Europe to the US. So that has potential to be a really good deal. That's basically the same price, a little bit cheaper even than the Flying Blue promo awards.
Because I'm looking at American off-peak prices, and they're not a huge discount from Sabre.
Yeah,
it's a discount, but it's not a huge jump. It's instead of 22.5, it's 20. Instead of 15, it's 12.5. Instead of 20, it's 17.5. Where that's a big difference,
Yeah. So the British Airways, I guess, is a higher value in terms of the amount of the discount. The big drawback is you need to be flying on flights operated by British Airways or Iberia. So for that flight that I took back from the UK to Austin, I paid 16,000 miles, but I also paid $350 in taxes and fees because of those fuel surcharges. Still, it can be a really good value, especially if you can find them on Iberia-operated flights, which have much more friendly, favorable fuel surcharges. So if you don't have a way to work a destination into the equation to get a discount, you may be able to take advantage of this substantial off-peak calendar. And then we'll also have a link to the off-peak dates for American Airlines. Like you said, not quite as big in terms of a sheer amount of the discount, but always good to save some miles if you can. And if you use the American one, you may be able to avoid some high taxes and fees on a long flight from Europe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's going to be
And
it.
I think we covered it. We did Delta, Air France, the American stuff. It's good stuff to get into, man, because with the podcast, we're generally focused on the bigger things and long haul flights. And I think it was good to get in and revisit some of the more local opportunities we have, especially with the American Airlines thing. Like, I'd be curious to do some price comparisons and figure out the CPPs that some of these flights are getting.
Yeah. Oh man, there's some high ones. Speaking of getting huge value, we had our biggest month ever in January for the booking service. We saved $109,000 on flights, and we're already off to a really good start in February with $20,501 in the first couple of days. So thank you to everybody that hired us to book tickets. And if you get stuck with a booking service is here to help. So you can send us a request for free, and we'll take a look at it, see if we can help you save some money and save some miles on your next trip.
Yep, we'll have the link in the show notes.
All right, that'll do it for this week's show. Thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate you guys.
Hey, Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.